3 days after the battle, Medical Officer So Young made a discovery that would haunt her for the rest of her career. The Veltar refugees aboard the Taiguk Rising were dying, not from physical wounds or disease, but from something far more disturbing. "Captain," she called over the intercom, her voice tight with concern. "You need to see this." Wu Jin found her in the makeshift medical bay they'd established for their alien guests. Through the transparent aluminum partition, he could see a dozen Veltar beings resting in specially modified chambers. What struck him immediately was how different they looked from their first encounter. "When we rescued them," So Young explained, "their bodies cycled through brilliant spectrums, blues, golds, purples, colors we don't even have names for. Look at them now." The Veltar had become muted, their crystalline forms shifting through dull grays and lifeless browns. Occasionally, a flicker of their original brilliance would surface, only to fade back into monotone despair. "Is it some kind of infection? Stress response?" "I thought so initially," So Young replied, pulling up her medical readings. "But their vital signs are stable. Physiologically, they're healthy. This appears to be something else entirely. Psychological, maybe even spiritual." Prism of Many Thoughts, the Veltar leader, had been the most affected. The being who had once radiated colors beyond human perception now appeared as a dull gray crystal formation. When they spoke, their harmonious voice had become a monotone whisper. "Captain who speaks protection," they said when Wu Jin approached. "We must speak of what your people have done to us." "Done to you?" "We saved your lives." "Yes, and in doing so, you have shown us something that no Veltar has ever seen. You have shown us what we are not." Mi Young joined the conversation, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. "Prism of Many Thoughts, can you explain what's happening to your people's coloration?" The alien's response carried harmonics of deep shame that their translation systems struggled to interpret. "For 50,000 cycles, we believed ourselves evolved beyond violence. We created art, music, philosophy. We told ourselves that our peaceful nature was the highest form of intelligence. We looked upon aggressive species with pity, believing they were primitive. But watching you fight the Keth, watching you choose death over abandoning others, we realized a terrible truth. We are not peaceful because we evolved beyond violence. We are peaceful because we are cowards." The words hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. So Young stepped forward, her medical training overriding personal shock. "That's not true. Choosing peace isn't cowardice." "Is it not?" Prism of Many Thoughts asked. "When our worlds burned, when our children died, when the Keth enslaved our people, we ran. We always run. We call it wisdom, but you showed us what true wisdom looks like. True wisdom is knowing when to fight, even when fighting means certain death." "You're losing your colors because of guilt?" Mi Young asked, fascination and horror warring in her voice. "We are losing our colors because we are losing ourselves. Every Veltar who witnessed your battle is experiencing this transformation. The children aboard our ships no longer cycle through joy colors. The elders cannot access the deep wisdom hues they have carried for centuries. We are becoming what we truly are, gray, empty, ashamed." Captain Wu Jin felt the weight of unintended consequences settling on his shoulders. "This wasn't our intention. We never meant to harm you." "You did not harm us, Captain who speaks protection. You revealed us to ourselves." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from Haye Jin on the bridge. "Captain, we're receiving multiple transmissions from across Keth space. You need to hear this." When Wu Jin returned to the bridge, the main display showed a galactic map dotted with communication sources. He Jin had been monitoring subspace chatter since their battle, and what she'd discovered defied all previous understanding of galactic politics. "It started 12 hours after our engagement," she explained. "Reports of the battle have spread across the galaxy faster than we thought possible. Every species under Keth occupation heard about what happened here." "And?" Wu Jin asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Uprisings, Captain. Dozens of them. Species that have been under Keth control for centuries are suddenly refusing to pay tribute. Some are even attacking Keth garrisons." Seung-min pulled up tactical reports from across the galaxy. The Keth response has been chaotic. They're reporting widespread tactical anomalies and requesting new protocols for managing aberrant resistance behavior. They don't know how to handle populations that suddenly refuse to retreat. Mi Young analyzed the pattern of uprisings with growing excitement. It's spreading like a virus, not a biological one but an ideological one. The concept that you can fight back against superior force is literally reshaping galactic civilization. But there's something else, Hai-Jin added grimly. The Keth High Command has issued a priority directive. They're assembling their entire 7th Fleet, over 300 ships, for what they're calling anomaly elimination. They're coming here, Captain, and they're bringing everything they have. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Their small victory had triggered a galactic revolution, but it had also marked them for complete annihilation. Time until the fleet arrives? Wu Jin asked. 48 hours, assuming maximum burn, Seung-min replied. Recommendations? We run, Dong-ho said immediately. We've done our part. Let the galaxy sort itself out. Negative, prism of many thoughts, had somehow entered the bridge, their gray form pulsing with barely perceptible color fluctuations. Captain who speaks protection, we have reached a decision. Which is, we will not run again. Our entire species has spent 3 days in contemplation, and we have chosen transformation over preservation. If the Keth fleet comes, we will stand with you. So Young's voice carried disbelief. But you said fighting is against your nature. Our nature was a lie we told ourselves to justify cowardice. Humans have shown us that nature can be changed, that evolution is not complete when intelligence is achieved. We choose to evolve again. Into what? Mi Young asked. Into something worthy of the protection you offered us. As if summoned by their leader's words, other Veltar began entering the bridge, not the brilliant, colorful beings they had once been, but something new. Their crystal forms had stabilized into deep metallic hues that suggested strength rather than beauty, determination rather than joy. We cannot promise we will be effective warriors, Prism of Many Thoughts continued. We have no experience with violence, no traditions of combat. But we have something else. 50,000 years of advanced technology, and the memory of every world the Keth have destroyed. You're talking about war, Wu Jin said quietly. We are talking about justice. The Keth have ruled through fear for 1,000 years because no one has ever made them pay a real price for their cruelty. You showed us that someone should. We choose to be that someone, alongside you. Jin-ho looked up from his pilot controls where he'd been calculating escape routes. Captain, with respect, this is insane. 300 Keth ships against our damaged exploration vessel and some refugee ships? Yes, Wu Jin replied, looking around at his crew, humans who had volunteered for exploration and found themselves at the center of a galactic revolution. It is insane. It's also right. So we're really doing this? Dong-ho asked. We're making our last stand here? We're making our stand here, the captain corrected. Whether it's our last stand depends on how creative we can be in the next 48 hours. Through the viewports, they could see the Veltar fleet, no longer brilliant and artistic, but transformed into something harder, something that spoke of determination rather than desperation. The galaxy was changing one species at a time, and humanity stood at the center of that transformation. Hai-Jin, Wu Jin ordered. Send a message to Earth. Full report on our situation and our decision. If this goes badly, I want them to know what we were trying to accomplish. And if it goes well? She asked. Wu Jin smiled grimly. If it goes well, we'll tell them ourselves. The Keth 7th Fleet arrived like a storm of metal and malice, their 300 ships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. War leader Thakmor's flagship, the Inevitable Dominion, dwarfed the human exploration vessel by a factor of 50. The message he broadcast across all frequencies carried the weight of absolute certainty. Human anomaly and corrupted Veltar vessels, you will witness the restoration of proper galactic order. Your resistance ends now. Captain Wu Jin, stood on the bridge of the Teguk Rising, looking out at odds that should have been mathematically impossible to overcome. Beside him, prism of many thoughts, now calling themselves steel gray resolve, pulsed with colors that had never existed in Veltar physiology before. Deep crimsons of determination, iron blues of unwavering purpose. Captain, Heejin reported, I'm receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The uprisings have spread to over 40 star systems. Species that haven't fought in millennia are coordinating resistance movements. More importantly, Sheng Min added, I'm detecting other fleets moving toward our position. Not Keth fleets, everyone else. It looks like half the galaxy is converging on this system. Mi Young looked up from her xenobiology station with wonder in her eyes. Captain, I think we've accidentally started the first galactic war in recorded history. The difference is, for the first time, it's not the Keth doing the conquering. The battle began with Thakmor's traditional demand for surrender, broadcast, across subspace for the entire galaxy to witness. His mechanically perfect voice carried undertones of confusion that had grown stronger with each resistance encounter. Human Captain Entity, you face elimination probability of 99.97%. Standard protocols require immediate surrender. Explain your tactical logic. Wu Jin's response would later be studied in military academies across 100 worlds. War leader Thakmor, humans don't have tactical logic. We have something better. Tactical stubbornness. The human ship charged. What followed defied every principle of space warfare that had governed galactic civilization for millennia. The Teguk Rising, accompanied by 12 transformed Veltar vessels, didn't try to outrun or outgun the Keth fleet. Instead, they did something that made no sense according to established doctrine. They flew directly into the center of the enemy formation. This is impossible. Thakmor's voice carried genuine panic now. Small vessels cannot survive inside our formation. You will be destroyed by crossfire from our own ships. That's the idea, Jinho replied, executing a maneuver that sent the Yai exploration ship diving between two Keth battlecruisers. It's hard to shoot at us when you're worried about hitting each other. The Veltar had brought technology to the fight that had never been weaponized before. Stellar cartography equipment that could map gravitational fields, terraforming tools that could reshape matter at the molecular level, scientific instruments that could analyze and exploit the fundamental forces of the universe. Steel Gray Resolve's ship, the Harmony Transformed, used resonance generators designed for geological surveys to create harmonic frequencies that literally shook Keth vessels apart from the inside. Other Veltar ships deployed gravitational lenses meant for stellar observation to focus deadly radiation on enemy weak points. Engineering to bridge, Dong Ho's voice crackled with excitement and terror. The Veltar have shared their technical databases with us. Kyung-Soo and I are integrating their technology with ours in real time. We're turning the ship into something that's never existed before. The Teguk Rising became a hybrid of human determination and Veltar innovation. Mining lasers enhanced with crystalline focusing arrays cut through Keth armor like it was paper. Terraforming charges augmented with gravitational manipulation created explosions that bent spacetime itself. But the most devastating weapon in their arsenal wasn't technological. It was psychological. Every time a Keth ship was destroyed by supposedly inferior opponents, the rigid military doctrine that had sustained their empire for centuries cracked a little more. Multiple Keth vessels are requesting withdrawal authorization, Heejin reported with amazement. Their commanders are reporting tactical uncertainty and anomalous combat stress responses. Combat stress? Sheng Min asked while coordinating. They're increasingly impossible tactical maneuvers. They're learning to feel fear, Mi Young explained. For the first time in their species' history, Keth warriors are discovering what it's like to face an enemy that refuses to die quietly. The tide turned when other fleets began arriving in the system. Not just one or two ships, but entire armadas representing dozens of species that had been under Keth domination for centuries. The communication channels filled with voices that had been silent for generations. This is the hegemony of Spiral's End, requesting coordinates for engagement with Keth forces. Mining consortium ships arriving in system. offering heavy industrial support. Free Colonies Fleet reporting for duty. Where do you need us? Each new arrival brought technology and tactics that the Keth had never encountered in combination. Species that had been forced to specialize in specific roles under Keth rule suddenly found themselves able to coordinate freely for the first time in centuries. War leader Thakmor's voice, when it came, carried defeat in every mechanical syllable. This is impossible. Galactic protocols do not permit coordinated resistance. Inferior species do not form alliances against superior force. They do now, Captain Wujin replied. We've changed the rules. The final engagement came when Thakmor's flagship, surrounded and outmaneuvered for the first time in Keth history, attempted to ram the Taeguk Rising in a desperate mirror of human tactics. But Jin Ho, veteran now of impossible maneuvers, simply moved aside and watched as the massive Keth vessel sailed past, its commander finally experiencing the helpless fury that had driven countless other species to desperation. War leader, Wujin called over open channels. You have a choice. Surrender and withdraw from occupied territories or face destruction. No more threats, no more ultimatums, just consequences. The silence stretched across light minutes of space before Thakmor's response came, stripped of mechanical certainty, and filled with something the Keth had never experienced before. Humility. Human captain entity. We do not understand how to surrender. Keth do not possess protocols for defeat. Then learn. Steel Gray Resolve's harmonious voice joined the conversation. We are learning to fight. You can learn to lose. The aftermath came slowly, measured not in hours but in months as news of the battle spread across the galaxy. The Gao, Keth Empire, faced with universal resistance for the first time in their history, began the slow process of retreat and renegotiation. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves working together against their former oppressors. The boy, Veltar, underwent the most dramatic transformation. Their new colors, deeper, stronger, more purposeful than their original brilliance, became symbols of evolution and growth throughout the galaxy. They developed the first pan-galactic council dedicated to mutual defense and cooperation. Captain Wujin found himself reluctantly famous as the human who had accidentally revolutionized galactic civilization. In his final log entry before the Taeguk Rising began its long journey home to Earth, he reflected on what they had accomplished. The galaxy has learned something new, that sometimes standing your ground changes everything. We came out here, looking for other life, and we found something better. We found other life that was willing to learn from us, just as we learned from them. The Veltar have regained their colors, but they're different now, stronger, more complex. And across the galaxy, species that have spent millennia running from stronger opponents are asking themselves a simple question. What if we stopped running? Humans have always been stubborn. Now, it seems, stubbornness is contagious. As the Taeguk Rising entered hyperspace for the journey home, her crew carried with them the knowledge that they had fundamentally altered the course of galactic history, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the simple human refusal to abandon those who needed help. Behind them, the galaxy continued to change, one species at a time, learning that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to run away. The crimson warning lights cast eerie shadows across the bridge of the HSV Defiance as Captain Jiwan stared at the tactical display with growing unease. 3 days had passed since Ambassador Minsu's diplomatic convoy had entered Vraxian space, and not a single transmission had been received. In the vast emptiness between stars, silence was rarely a good sign. Still nothing from the peace delegation? Jiwan asked, though she already knew the answer from the grim expression on communications. Officer Soman's face. Complete radio silence, Captain. Their last transmission was the standard diplomatic arrival protocol when they reached the Cathera system. Soman's fingers danced across her console, checking frequencies that had remained stubbornly quiet. I've tried every emergency channel, every backup frequency. It's like they vanished. Tactical analyst Hyun Woo looked up from his workstation, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of concern. Captain, I've been monitoring Vraxian military communications. There's been a significant increase in encrypted traffic over the past 18 hours. Whatever they're discussing, they don't want anyone else to hear it. Ji-won felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. Ambassador Minsu had been one of Earth's most experienced diplomats, a man who had successfully negotiated treaties with 17 different alien species. If anyone could broker peace with the Vraxian coalition, it would be him. But the silence was deafening, and in her 15 years of military service, Ji-won had learned to trust her instincts when they screamed danger. "Patch me through to Admiral Daeho," she ordered. The Admiral's weathered face appeared on the main screen moments later, his steel-gray eyes reflecting the same concern that gnawed at every human commander in the sector. Behind him, the bridge of the flagship Invincible hummed with quiet efficiency, officers moving with the practiced ease of veterans who had seen too much war. "Captain Ji-won, I assume this is about our missing diplomats?" "Yes, sir. Something's wrong. Ambassador Minsu would never maintain radio silence this long unless..." She let the implication hang in the space between them. "Unless he can't, Admiral," Daeho finished grimly. "I've been thinking the same thing. The Vraxians requested this peace summit, claimed they wanted to end the bloodshed before it escalated further, but their military buildup suggests otherwise." Captain Yoonji's voice crackled over the comm from her destroyer squadron. "Admiral, my scouts are picking up massive fleet movements in the outer Vraxian systems. They're not positioning for defense. This looks offensive." The Admiral's jaw tightened. 3 years of intermittent skirmishes with the Vraxian coalition had taught humanity that their enemies were cunning. But this felt different. This felt like a trap closing around them. "Sir," Hyunwoo interrupted, his voice urgent. "I'm detecting a broadcast signal from Vraxian space. It's being transmitted on all frequencies, including civilian channels." "Put it through," Admiral Daeho commanded. The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a scene that would haunt the human fleet for the rest of their lives. Ambassador Minsu knelt in chains before a massive Vraxian tribunal, his diplomatic uniform torn and bloodied. Around him, the other 16 members of the human delegation were similarly restrained, their faces bearing the marks of systematic torture. The Vraxian High Commander, a creature whose insectoid features seemed designed by evolution itself to inspire fear, spoke in the clicking, mechanical language of his species. Automated translation scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Behold the fate of those who dare oppose the natural order. Humanity's time of expansion ends here." What followed was broadcast live across the galaxy. One by one, the human diplomats were executed with calculated brutality. Ambassador Minsu was saved for last, his final words barely audible as he looked directly into the camera. Tell them we tried." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the human fleet in stunned silence. Captain Ji-won felt something break inside her chest, a fundamental shift that she would later recognize as the moment her species crossed a line from which there would be no return. Around her, she could see the same transformation occurring in every face on the bridge. Communications Officer Soman's hands trembled as she gripped her console. Hyunwoo's analytical calm had been replaced by something cold and calculating. "They broadcast it." Admiral Daeho's voice came through the comm, quiet but carrying an edge that made seasoned Marines take notice. "They wanted the entire galaxy to see them murder our people under a flag of truce." Marine Commander Taehyun's voice joined the conversation, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by something that sounded like barely contained fury. "Admiral, my troops are ready. We've been playing by their rules long enough." "No," the Admiral said, and for a moment Ji-won thought he meant to de-escalate. Then she heard the rest of his statement. "We're not playing by their rules anymore. We're not playing by anyone's rules." Captain Yoonji's voice carried a note of anticipation that would have terrified any alien listening. "What are your orders, sir?" Admiral Daeho was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his words would echo through galactic history. "For 3 years we've tried to wage a civilized war against an uncivilized enemy. We've honored their wounded, respected their civilians, followed every convention of interstellar warfare. And they respond by torturing and murdering our diplomats on live broadcast. He paused, and Captain Jiwan could almost hear the collective intake of breath across the human fleet. They want to see monsters? They're about to learn what real monsters look like. All ships prepare for unrestricted warfare protocols. As of now, there are no rules, no conventions, no mercy. They wanted a war without limits. They're going to get one. Communications Officer Samin looked up at Captain Jiwan with eyes that had aged years in the past few minutes. Captain, should I relay the Admiral's message to Earth Command? Jiwan nodded slowly, understanding that this moment would be remembered as the turning point, not just in the war, but in humanity's relationship with the galaxy itself. Send it. And Somin? Add a personal message from me to the families of the diplomatic mission. Tell them their loved ones will be avenged. As the Defiance began its turn toward Vraxian space, along with the rest of the human fleet, Captain Jiwan felt the last vestiges of the peaceful explorer that humanity once claimed to be slip away into the cold vacuum of space. They had been pushed beyond their breaking point, and the galaxy was about to discover what lay beneath the veneer of human civilization. In the depths of space, the human war machine began to awaken, and the universe would never be the same. The diplomatic phase of the conflict was over. The real war was about to begin. 72 hours after the diplomatic massacre, the human fleet hung in the darkness between stars like a collection of predatory beasts waiting to strike. Admiral Deho stood in the war room aboard the Invincible studying holographic displays that showed the Vraxian home system in exquisite detail. The massive planet of Cathara gleamed blue-green in the projection, home to 12 billion souls who had no idea what was coming for them. Intelligence report, Hyunwoo, the Admiral commanded without looking away from the display. Hyunwoo stepped forward, his tablet glowing with classified data that would have made Galactic peacekeepers sick with horror. Sir, our deep reconnaissance probes have mapped every major population center, industrial complex, and military installation on Cathara. But more importantly, we've discovered something else. The hologram shifted, revealing orbital structures that surrounded the Vraxian homeworld like a deadly necklace. Space stations, defensive platforms, and what appeared to be massive energy collectors formed a protective shell around the planet. What am I looking at? Admiral Deho asked, though something in his voice suggested he already suspected the answer. Extermination facilities, sir. Hyunwoo's voice was clinically cold. The Vraxians weren't just planning to defeat us, they were preparing to sterilize every human world in the galaxy. These orbital platforms, they're designed to superheat planetary atmospheres. Complete genocide, sir. Every man, woman, and child. The war room fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Captain Jiwan, who had been reviewing tactical data with her staff, looked up sharply. How many worlds were targeted? All of them, Hyunwoo replied simply. Earth, the colonies, the mining stations, everything. The diplomatic summit was meant to keep us distracted while they moved these weapons into position. Admiral Deho finally turned from the display, and the expression on his weathered face made veteran Marines take a step back. It wasn't anger. Anger was human, understandable, controllable. This was something else entirely, something colder. Captain Yunji, report on fleet status. Yunji's voice came through the comm with barely contained excitement. All destroyer squadrons are ready for combat operations, Admiral. But sir, I have a request. My crews have been developing some modifications to our standard weapons packages. What kind of modifications? The kind that ignore the Galactic Warfare Convention's restrictions on psychological warfare. We've been studying Vraxian neurology, sir. Turns out they have some very specific phobias we can exploit. Marine Commander Tae Hyun joined the conversation from his position aboard the assault carrier Retribution. Sir, my troops are ready to deploy, but I need to know, are we taking prisoners this time? The question hung in the air like a challenge. For 3 years, human forces had operated under strict rules of engagement. Enemy wounded were treated, civilians were protected, and prisoners were handled according to interstellar law. It was what separated civilization from chaos, what kept humans from becoming the monsters that some alien species whispered they truly were. Admiral Deho looked around the war room at faces that reflected his own grim determination. These weren't the explorers and peacekeepers that humanity had sent to the stars decades ago. War had changed them, hardened them, and the diplomatic massacre had stripped away their last pretenses of mercy. No prisoners, he said quietly. No quarter. No mercy. The words seemed to electrify the fleet communications. Captain G1 could hear the change in voices across all channels, a collective exhale of restraint being abandoned, of humanity finally unleashing something it had kept carefully caged. "Sir," Communications Officer Somin interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the Keltorian Empire. They're offering to mediate." Admiral Deho laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "The Keltorians, our neutral neighbors, who happen to share technology with the Vraxians, put them through." The holographic display shifted to show Ambassador Vektar, the Keltorian representative whose elegant features and melodious voice had charmed diplomatic circles for decades. Behind him, the pristine chambers of the Keltorian High Council gleamed with ethereal light. "Admiral Deho, the Keltorian Empire extends its deepest condolences for the tragic loss of your diplomatic mission. However, we believe that escalation serves no one's interests. Perhaps we could arrange—" "No." The Admiral's single word cut through the diplomatic preamble like a blade. "You want to know what serves our interests, Ambassador? Watching Kythera burn." The Keltorian's composure cracked slightly. "Admiral, surely you don't mean to target civilian populations. The galaxy has rules, conventions that separate us from... What?" Admiral Deho stepped closer to the holographic projector. "From monsters? The Vraxians showed us what they think of our conventions when they tortured 17 diplomats to death on live broadcast. They showed us what they think of civilian populations when they built planet killers to exterminate our entire species." Ambassador Vektar's elegant features had gone pale. "You cannot seriously intend to abandon all pretense of civilization." "Civilization?" Captain G1 found herself speaking before she realized it. "Ambassador, your civilization stood by and watched as an entire species was marked for extinction. Your civilization remained neutral while genocide was being planned. Don't lecture us about civilization." The Keltorian looked desperately between the human officers. "There must be some way to resolve this peacefully. Surely humanity hasn't abandoned all hope of coexistence?" Admiral Deho was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a species' fury. "We tried coexistence, Ambassador. We tried diplomacy, negotiation, and peaceful resolution. The Vraxians' response was to plan our complete annihilation while murdering our ambassadors for entertainment." He gestured to the tactical display showing Kythera. "So no, we haven't abandoned hope of coexistence. We've simply realized that coexistence requires the other party to actually want to coexist. The Vraxians have made their intentions clear." "What are you saying?" the Keltorian whispered. "I'm saying that humanity is about to demonstrate why every species in this galaxy should have thought twice before backing us into a corner." Admiral Deho's smile was the most terrifying thing the Keltorian had ever seen. "We're going to show the galaxy what happens when you try to exterminate the human race." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Keltorian staring at empty air. In the war room of the Invincible, the human officers turned back to their planning with renewed purpose. Mercy was a luxury they could no longer afford. Restraint was a weakness their enemies had exploited for the last time. "All ships," Admiral Deho announced over fleet communications, "prepare for Operation Nightfall. Target, Kythera system. Mission parameters, total warfare. No restrictions, no limitations, no mercy." As the human fleet began its final approach to the Vraxian homeworld, 12 billion inhabitants went about their daily lives, unaware that they had awakened something that should have remained sleeping. The diplomatic phase of the conflict was over. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was about to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of when all restraints were removed. In the cold vacuum of space, the human war machine moved forward with deadly purpose, carrying with it the fury of a species pushed beyond its breaking point. The first phase of Operation Nightfall began not with the thunderous roar of conventional weapons, but with silence, the kind of silence that preceded nightmares. Stealth ships, invisible to Vraxian sensors, drifted through the outer system like ghosts carrying death in their wake. Captain Jihoon commanded the reconnaissance wing from his modified Corvette Shadowwalker, watching as his teams infiltrated the very heart of Vraxian space. "Target acquired," whispered Lieutenant Neon over the encrypted channel. Her special operations team had spent 18 hours crawling through the maintenance tunnels of Kythera's primary orbital defense platform. "Charges are set, awaiting your signal." Jihoon studied the tactical display showing 12 billion red dots representing Vraxian civilians going about their daily lives, unaware that humanity had come calling. In the old days, just weeks ago, though it felt like centuries, he might have hesitated. The scale of what they were about to unleash would have given any civilized being pause. But that was before the diplomatic massacre, before the discovery of the genocide machines, before humanity had been forced to confront the simple truth that, in a galaxy full of predators, the only way to survive was to become the apex predator. "All teams execute," Jihoon commanded. The orbital defense platforms died in perfect synchronization, their explosions lighting up the night sky of Kythera like deadly fireworks. But the true horror was yet to come. As the Vraxian military scrambled to respond to what they assumed was a conventional assault, they discovered that humanity had evolved far beyond conventional warfare. Aboard the human flagship Invincible, Chief Engineer Kyung-soo monitored readouts that would have horrified the Galactic Ethics Committee. His team had spent years developing weapons that violated every known convention of interstellar warfare, devices too terrible to deploy against any enemy that might show mercy in return. But mercy was no longer a consideration. Nanite deployment. Successful, Kyung-soo reported to Admiral Daeho. The atmospheric processors on Kythera are beginning molecular conversion. Estimated time to complete atmospheric toxicity, 14 hours. Admiral Daeho nodded grimly. The nanites were designed to convert Kythera's oxygen into compounds lethal to Vraxian physiology while remaining breathable to humans. It was genocide with surgical precision, the kind of weapon that could only be conceived by a species that had been pushed beyond all moral boundaries. "Sir," Communications Officer Sujin interrupted, her voice tight with something between excitement and horror. "I'm intercepting Vraxian military communications. They're requesting permission to surrender." "Response?" Admiral Daeho asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Denied. All surrender requests are to be ignored." The bridge fell silent for a moment. In the old days, refusing surrender would have been unthinkable. Now it was standard operating procedure. The Vraxians had declared their intention to exterminate humanity. They would receive the same consideration they had planned to show human civilians. On the surface of Kythera, chaos reigned as the first effects of the nanite assault became apparent. Vraxian civilians stumbled through streets that had become death traps, their respiratory systems failing as the very air turned toxic. But this was only the beginning of humanity's fury. Marine Commander Wanbin led the first wave of ground assault troops into the Vraxian capital, his powered armor gleaming with the phosphorescent glow of atmospheric processors working to make the air breathable for human lungs. His mission was simple: capture the central command complex and extract intelligence about other coalition military installations. What his teams found in the underground levels of the command center changed everything. "Admiral," Wanbin's voice crackled over the comm, thick with barely controlled rage. "You need to see this. We found the camps." The holographic transmission that followed would haunt every human officer who witnessed it. Massive, underground facilities stretched for kilometers beneath the Vraxian capital. Row upon row of containment cells held human prisoners, not soldiers, but civilians. Men, women, children who had been captured during the early raids on human settlements. But these weren't simple prison camps. They were experimentation facilities. They were trying to figure out what makes us so effective in combat. Wanbin continued, his voice hollow with shock. Psychological profiling, genetic analysis, surgical experimentation. They've been torturing our people to understand why humans are so adaptable in warfare. Admiral Deho stared at the horrific images streaming from the underground complex. Humans strapped to examination tables, their bodies bearing the marks of systematic vivisection. Research notes detailing attempts to replicate human aggression in Vraxian test subjects. Video logs of Vraxian scientists discussing the most efficient methods of psychological torture. "How many?" he asked quietly. "Over 3,000 in this facility alone, sir. And based on the records we're finding, there are at least 12 more locations across Vraxian space." The last vestiges of restraint that had held humanity back finally crumbled. Admiral Deho looked around the bridge at officers whose faces reflected his own transformation from protector to predator. They had tried to wage civilized war against an enemy that recognized no civilization. "Kyungsu," the admiral commanded, "deploy the gravitational charges." The chief engineer's hands hesitated over his controls. The gravitational charges were humanity's most terrible weapon, devices that created localized black holes, consuming everything within a 50-kilometer radius. They had been designed as a last resort against existential threats. "Sir, the gravitational charges will affect civilian population centers. The casualties will be acceptable," Admiral Deho finished coldly. "They made their choice when they built those camps. When they decided to torture our children to understand how to kill us more efficiently." The first gravitational charge detonated in the heart of Cathara's largest city, creating a sphere of absolute destruction that consumed buildings, vehicles, and living beings with equal indifference. The second charge followed minutes later, then a third, each one erasing another piece of Vraxian civilization from existence. Captain Yunji, monitoring enemy communications from her destroyer squadron, reported with grim satisfaction. "Sir, Vraxian fleet units in the outer system are attempting to retreat. Several ships have already jumped to hyperspace." "Let them run," Admiral Deho replied. "I want survivors to spread the word. I want every species in the galaxy to know what happens when you target human civilians." Across the Vraxian home system, humanity's unleashed fury manifested in ways that would become legend throughout the galaxy. Psychological warfare units led by Commander Yuna broadcast specially designed frequency patterns that induced species-specific terror responses in Vraxian minds. Entire military formations surrendered without firing a shot, their crews driven mad by sounds that exploited evolutionary fears buried deep in the Vraxian psyche. Stealth teams deployed biological agents tailored to Vraxian physiology, turning their own immune systems against them. Supply convoys vanished without a trace, their crews found days later arranged in patterns that spelled out messages in human script, warnings that were broadcast across the galaxy. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of humanity's assault was its efficiency. Where alien species conducted warfare through massive fleet engagements and formal battle lines, humans struck like a virus, infiltrating every aspect of Vraxian society and turning their own infrastructure against them. Within 72 hours, the jewel of the Vraxian Empire had become a tomb. The orbital defense platforms were silent, the atmosphere was toxic, and the surface was scarred by gravitational weapons that had erased entire cities from existence. As the human fleet prepared to move to the next target, Admiral Deho broadcast a message on all galactic frequencies. His words were simple, delivered in the calm tone of a teacher explaining basic facts to slow students. "This is what happens when you attempt to exterminate the human race. This is what happens when you torture our civilians to understand how to kill us more effectively. We are no longer bound by your rules, your conventions, or your concepts of mercy. You wanted to see monsters. Now you have your wish." The message ended with coordinates for 12 more Vraxian worlds, each one scheduled for similar treatment. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations watched in growing horror as they realized that humanity had finally stopped pretending to be anything other than the apex predators they had always been. The diplomatic phase was over, the restraints were gone, and the real war had begun. In the cold vacuum of space, the human fleet moved toward its next target, carrying with it the fury of a species that had been pushed beyond all breaking points. The galaxy would never be the same.